Hey, what's up YouTube? Welcome to this build guide for a Path of Exile 3.7 Legion. We have made a build here, which is Freezing Pulse Totems. Now, I'm sorry about this up here. It's gonna have to stay there because my key binding for this is also recording. So yeah, Freezing Pulse Totems, Hierophant. I'll explain the details, but basically we're using a Timeless Jewel of Militant Fate. I'll explain all the details about it. I'm just going to run two maps. First, a tier 4, and the reason for this is the build was made for farming white maps. So this is going to be quick and easy, just to show the clear speed of it. I'm going to skip all of this one anyways. So we're just moving around with freezing, Flame Dash. You'll see the point of the build when we reach the Legion. Now this is a staff build, as you've noticed. We're using a rare Elder Staff right now, but for the most part, for the longest time, I've been using a Sire of Shards, which makes projectile skills add more projectiles, but cast in a Nova. It was a suitor, and I would suggest it for while you're low level and you're not min-maxed yet, because it covers more of the screen, so it's safer. But I reached a point where I am pretty tanky. I only have 5.4 life, but consider that we have Mind Over Matter, and we have some ES as well. So we roughly have almost 7k. Plus the fact that we have 5 totems and each totem is massive regen of both mana and life as Hierophant. We'll go through the details again after this. But as you can see, the speed of the build is well, it's true of all totem builds, is we don't have to stick around. We just spawn the totems and they do the job. And then we flame dash around. Whenever the filter tells us something dropped, we go back, grab it, and that's it. Now, in white maps, it's much faster than in higher tier maps. I'll do a tier 12 after this, just to show that we can do it. We can do tier 15s, but tier 15, the problem is tier 15 plus generals, when they spawn in Legion, have so much HP that it takes forever. And the problem, they also have so much HP you can't freeze them. And obviously the main defense of the build is that we freeze everything. So that's a problem. It's doable, but it's going to take forever. It's not exactly efficient. So now this is a channel map, so it's not exactly the best thing, but like the big thing about Legion with this build is that we can precast the totems around the monolith, so that when the mobs spawn, they basically spawn dead for most of it. Also, we have so much projectile speed, and I'll explain the mechanic of projectile speed with Freezing Pulse, but the projectile speed is basically range for Freezing Pulse. So the more proj speed we have, the more it covers. So in open maps like Bog or Dunes or whatever open maps that the monolith tends to spawn in the center, you just spawn the 5 totems around the monolith, and as soon as the mob spawns, the frozen mob spawns, like 80% of everything is already done, and then you just go to the edges and deal with what's left. Now, of course, it's not Tornado Shot clear speed, but I don't like Tornado Shot personally, so I'll never do it. And then we have the advantage of doing that with bosses. So that's the channel. Now this is, again, I've showed you this because the point of the build is to clear white maps. Now, that was a channel, so it wasn't exactly the best monolith. And now we're gonna do a Lava Lake, I think. Yeah, tier 12, again. Another big thing, you can run pretty much everything. There's 3 mods that I reroll. There's 2 that you really need to reroll, which is Reflect Elemental. It's not deadly, so like if you didn't notice it when you roll the map and you jump into the map, you're not gonna kill yourself. But it's the totems that's gonna one-shot themselves every time they shoot. which makes it kind of unplayable. Well, at least you'll notice it and you can walk out of the map. And then the other thing I reroll, and again that's down to freeze, is monsters cannot be slowed down below base speed because that affects freeze. Which means the mobs can be frozen, but they'll still be able to move. And again, it's the main defense. Now, I don't care about it in low maps, because everything's gonna get one shot anyways. But in this high tier level, especially when like we have a weakness and all that, I would reroll it. And the third thing I reroll, which has nothing to do with the build, but I just hate it, I always roll it, is temp chains. Now granted, I'll go through a few options. In the end, right now I'm using Zealotry, because this is a crit build. Crit means freeze. But you could also use Haste, especially if you're focusing on clear speed, and then Haste would let you have a Washer's Eye, which makes you immune to temp chains. In that case, you don't need to reroll temp chains. Although temp chains is just me, it's a pet peeve, but like if you have a warding flask, which we do, most of the time the temp chain is not going to affect you. It's just me again. I hate it. I always reroll it. Yeah, so basically it. Like you barely see a difference in clear speed. The difference will be with the monolith, because the mobs are a lot more dangerous. Of course, it has to be a shaper map too, so. Yeah, the mobs being more dangerous means we have to be more careful where we position ourselves. What I tend to do is take the last 2 seconds to just make sure I'm out of the circle. Don't need to do that with Sire of Shards as long as you can still freeze, but the damage on Sire of Shards is kind of meh. So at this tier, and that's why I changed my staff at this tier, it became kind of impossible to freeze big mobs, which are the important ones to freeze. But yeah, with this staff, and it's a big staff, but it's pretty cheap to craft yourself because it's a staff, so nobody cares. So the base, it's a 84 item level Shaper staff. You have 2 options, either go Eclipse if you want to go full crit. Eclipse staff is a special staff that has crit as an implicit. I personally went for a Maelstrom staff for defenses. Most staves have 18% block chance, Maelstrom has 20. So yeah, alright, so we cleared this. I'll just get rid of all that and then we'll go through the build. So, as I said, it's a Hierophant. Freezing Pulse, so the core items of the build will be just the first nose and the Sire of Shards if you decide to go that route with the Sire of Shards. So Sire of Shards, I don't have the item anymore, I sold it, but it's a staff that you can get at level 49. You have to socket and link in the staff, and what it does is if your projectile skill is socketed in the staff, the projectile is going to cast 4 more projectiles. So with Freezing Pulse it would be 9 because it's the 1 base, plus the first nose gives 2 each, so that's 5, plus the Sire of Shards would be 9, but it casts in a Nova. And the advantage of casting in a Nova for Freezing Pulse is how the spread is. As you might have noticed, the way the projectiles are cast is in an arc, and the width of the arc is based on the distance from the target. So if you self-cast, you can control that because it's based on the distance of the cursor. So the closest you cast to yourself, the wider the arc will be, which is better because they don't shotgun anyways, so you want to cover as much ground as possible. If you cast further away, then they'll be narrower. So you want to reach a sweet spot usually because the Freezing Pulse projectiles are wide. So you try to find the sweet spot where they are wide enough to get as much arc without leaving space between the projectiles. Now the problem with totems, and that's a bit of the downside, is you don't control that, and the totems will just pick the closest target to them and then shoot everything and then calculate the arc based on that. So if you're surrounded by mobs, you might be in danger because they'll all shoot in the same direction, especially since as Hierophant, you cast 2 at the same time, so it's a bit of a problem. It used to be that we had one more totem as Hierophant, but we only cast 1 at a time, so it means we cast them faster, but it also means they're closest together, which can be annoying because then you have less coverage. But it's not a big deal if you have enough cast speed. And if you kill fast enough, they'll just cover everything anyways. It's also a crit build. The base of what I wanted is a fast build that was freezing everything, so I didn't have to deal with how dangerous Legion mobs can be. So as long as I can freeze everything, we're good. The only dangerous Legion that I have to deal with is Templar, because 80% of the Templar mobs have a proximity shield. It's a projectile build, so it can be annoying. But all the other factions, as soon as they spawn, they're frozen or dead. So yeah, the mandatory gear is the 2 first nodes and the Sire of Shards, as long as you use that. Now, according to the build 2, we are using Militant Fate, a Militant Fate jewel, which is one of the 2 new timeless jewels that changes to 3. By now you should know at least basically how they work. This is a Templar jewel, so what the Templar jewels do, it's pretty simple. I put them in order on how they are easy to manage and work around. So the Karoe and the Market ones are the easiest because they only add things to the tree. They don't remove anything. So the Karoe is the one that you'll mostly use because it's super cheap. The Market one is super costly. But they work kind of the same way. It's just the Market one is based on dexterity. The Karoe one is based on strength. Then after that, I see the Templar as easier to manage, and the reason for this is that you do lose some things. Mainly, you lose your travel nodes. So your stat nodes that you travel with becomes Devotion. I'll explain Devotion in a second, but it's kind of easy to work around that because you can easily put it in where you usually always have a stat that is super high, that you don't need more of it. So you can work around that. So the travel nodes, you lose the stats and they become +10 Devotion. All your minor nodes that are not travel nodes like these will keep their stat but get +5 Devotion on top of them. And then the notables will either not change but gain 5 devotions like the small ones, and then the seed number, what it does, all this is static, so seed number, regardless of the seed number, this happens. What the seed number does is that there are some notables that will change into something extremely powerful that will scale if you reach 150 devotion. I have 3 here. This is an extremely powerful jewel. I'm not using that, but I'm probably going to make a build with this same jewel in the same spot because, as you can see, I have 3 nodes that are exactly the same here. And these are +1 to all max res. That includes chaos. So if I had 150 devotion, I could get in here and get +3 all max res. That's basically a Sapphire frame. And then, of course, in the same area, we have the +1 lightning here. That would be an extremely tanky build. I'll think about it. But this is the reason why we're taking those 2 stats here, because then these also have +5 devotion. And how devotion works, first, as I said, if you have special notables, they are unlocked if you have 150 devotion. But on top of that, devotion also has a scaling effect that is on the jewel. So as you can see, the first 2 stats are the same as on any timeless jewel, but the Templar ones have special stats that are rolled directly on the jewel, not on the seed. And you have 2 of them. There's a pool of about 20, and you just find one that has 2 stats that works for you. So in our case, elemental and totem damage works perfectly with us. There are some defensive ones like mana or regen, whatnot. I went for full damage here. So for each 10 devotion that we stack up, we get 8% damage on the jewel, and we have 95 as we speak. We might get this wheel as we level up. It's not exactly relevant for us because it's mainly area of effect, but there's also some cast speed, and then each node will give us +5 devotion, so that's 15, so that's like 12% damage plus the attack speed, the cast speed. So we might go that route. So yeah, I'll go through the gear first, then I will go through the the passive 3, and I skip something on the Templar Jewel, for those who know that jewel. And then, I'll go on the specifics of the gameplay on how you play the build. There's a lot of things here that you can change, that you go and work around. The mandatory thing really is the first nose. You want to reach a lot of cast speed. The more cast speed you have, the more coverage you'll have, because the totems will recast more often. You want to go crit because freeze, that's the point of the build. And then power charges generation. Not generation, but scaling. Because we are built around power charges because of the keystone inner conviction, which I'll explain when I go to the true. So gear, that's the gear I used. I'll skip the stat because again the build was based around Sigh of Shards. This is just an upgrade and a very end game upgrade. As you can see, everything else is rares except for 2 items. So Pandemonious is basically you make a cold build, you go Pandemonious if you can afford it. That's the only very costly item except the staff, obviously. But as I said, the Sigh of Shards is super cheap. It's like 1 all. Maybe a few C's if you go for the... There's only one roll on the Sigh of Shards that is really important, and it's the projectile damage. It can go to up to 100. Try to find one that's close to that. The rest is all stats and all res, but the all res is super small, so it's not exactly relevant. So yeah, I would go with Pandemonious for the amulet. The other option is if you, after you scaled up your crit chance a lot, you could go what's her name? Fallacy. It's someone's fallacy. Anyway, it's the amulet that reduces your crit chance but massively increases your crit multi. It will massively increase your damage. The problem is that it has no res and it has no life on it. This one has at least some res. Also, it has dexterity that I need. And it blinds enemies. So it's massive damage because 20% cold resistance against chill enemies, and enemies will always be chilled on cold damage. But on top of that, if they are chilled, they are blinded. So, on top of being slower, they also attack less often. Well, they hit less often, so it's defensive and also the damage. This amulet can be gotten from tools, Breachstone. If you run tools, you'll drop an amulet that has a different name. It's the base amulet, and then when you kill the boss, you might get the Blessing of Tool. Blessing of Tool is super cheap. It's like a few chaos. It's the amulet that costs a lot. I bought it at 3x but a week ago, so it might have gotten down since then. You can easily run this Breachstone. The base Breachstone is level 70, so it's pretty easy fight at that level. And it costs like, what, 8c? Maybe? 5 to 8c, the basic Breachstone, so just spam them, eventually you'll get it. So yeah, and the other... unique I use is Sanctuary Coil. Now this is me. It's a belt I usually go to in most builds because it gives a lot of life. It's a lot of belt. It gives stats, so it makes it easier to scale stats and to get the stats you need for your gems and your gear. On top of that, if you have high stats across the board, like I do, then you have a scaling damage that scales off your lowest stat. But on top of it is you'll always at least get 1, usually 2 ailment immunities. So of course if you play a class that has ailment immunity in the class, like Pathfinder by example, the Orphan could if you go the Arcane Surge route, but whatever. Then this belt is less relevant. At that point I would probably use an Abyssal one, but in here, it's especially strong if you have a dex build, because if your dex is higher than intelligence, then you have frozen immunity, so that's why you get your frozen immunity, so you can skip a heat flask and get something else, like reflexes or iron skin. But in our case, we don't have that. As you have seen, the dexterity is our lowest stat. We are shock immune, though, because our intelligence is higher than our strength, and then our strength is also higher than dexterity, so we are ignite and shock immune. That also counts for ground effects. So, we can't be shocked from ground effects or from lightning damage, making extra lightning damage maps much less scary. So, but this belt, you can easily find something else to replace it. Again, it's not mandatory. This is pretty much mandatory if you have the money. Otherwise, get another like crit amulet. But this is like just me. And then the rest is just rares. Well, okay. It can be rares, like entry level. Any rare that has life and resistances will work. My gloves are nothing special, it's just life and res. And my boots too, res, life, movement speed. You need movement speed on the boots because you don't have much of it. You'll feel very slow if you don't have it. And the ring are the same. Res, life, and then stats. Res, life, and then stats. You try to get cold damage and cast speed if you can, but those makes the rings pretty costly. I got one of them here, but this one has no res, so that was making it cheap. And then helmet, res. Now this helmet I'll explain in a second. It's the end level of the helmet. But at the base it's, again, res and life. And stat, especially intelligence. So for those who don't know, the 3 stats can be rolled are specific to a gear slot, but also to the base. So gloves will always have dexterity available, helmets will always have intelligence available, and then belts will always have strength available. But on top of it, if you have gloves, helmets, or boots, will also have the stat available based on their base. So in our case, we're only using armor because it's the armor league. We could have rolled strength on all 3 of them. If you have hybrids, that's where hybrids comes in especially interesting. On top of gem colors, you have both available. Now, I didn't need my intel here because we are intel based, but like it's just one thing to remember. So again here, life and res. Now this helmet is the first thing. My staff, my helmet, and my armor, my body armor, and then eventually my gloves, but that's the hardest one to get, are the end game levels. Again, as I explained, entry level, just get res and life on all your rares. The amulet is the important one. Again, the belt, you can get whatever you want, and you use Sigh of Shards as entry level for your staff. But then after that, eventually you'll reach red maps, and then your level, your damage will be meh. I would still keep the Sigh of Shards. The one big increase to damage that you can find is a helmet. This is a Shaper fossil crafted helmet. The fossil craft is super cheap because all you need is frigid and etheric. So frigid is the one that gives you more cold, but also opens up special cold modifiers, which the one you need, one you want. And etheric is just to make it easier to hit the spell damage. So the spell damage here, the added cold damage to spells, is a Shaper base. You want a item level 83 Shaper helmet. On armor base, it's pretty easy to get because Shaper is crafter and usually is caster, and usually casters will seek out ES bases, so it's easier to get here. But all you want, the base doesn't matter for the rolls, but you want a Shaper base to have access to the cold damage to spells, and you want to fossil craft it with a frigid to get access to the nearby enemies that have minus cold resistance. So at the base, if you want to really, really go cheap, you get a primitive resonator, which is the 1-slot resonator, and you get frigid to have access to nearby enemies that have cold resistance. If it's a Shaper base, you'll have access to the cold damage to spells as well. Personally, I also crafted with Etheric because Etheric is cheap. Potent resonators was just 2-slot, it's just 2C anyways right now in the Softcore League. So I went for it, and the reason is by adding an Etheric, I increased the chances to get the caster spell, and the cold damage to spells is a caster roll. So it took me 5 or 6 tries, maybe I got lucky. And what you want is either on top of those 2, ignore everything else, like the gem sockets are irrelevant. What you want is the cold damage to spells, and then my enemies have a minus cold resistance, and then either a good life roll, if you're really, really lucky, or at least an open prefix and then craft a life, which is what I did. It cost me about 10C to craft this, plus 10C to get the base. So what you want is you go on the market and you find an 83 plus item level Shaper helmet of the base you want. In our case, we want for armor. That can be between 5 to 10C depending on what base you're taking, and then after that you get resonators, and then you craft with frigid and etheric if you want to go that route. and then you either scour and use alchemical resonators or chaotic resonators if you want. The annoying part is to trade for the fossils / resonators. Second thing I went for is the armor. I actually went for the armor first, but it was much more costly to craft it, so I would go for the helmet first. And the one thing you want to hit here is spell, the base spell crit chance, because it's a crit build. Now, for those who don't know how this works, this is a lot more powerful than, say, I don't have any gear that has crit chance. You'll have modifiers that will be global crit chance. This is a multiplier of the base. So if you look at Freezing Pulse base crit chance is 6%. And then all other modifiers to global crit chance will be multiplying that. So if you get a 50% increase, that's going to be 3%. Right? At first you want those modifiers, but eventually as you stack them up, they give you diminishing returns because it's always a multiplier of the base. At some point, this modifier, this is an added value to the base, will be a much stronger. So my base crit chance right now is 6 from the Freezing Pulse, plus 1.47, so 7.5 if you round. We're not using crit chance. There's a gem crit chance, increased crit chance, which also has flat base crit chance, so that can work too. And by increasing the base, once you have a lot of crit chance, increased crit chance modifier, it's going to multiply each other. So as we speak, without power charges, we have 36.98, but with the power charges we reach easily like 60%, and then we use a diamond flask, but I'll get through that in a second. So yeah, so you want here to get that modifier, you need a Shaper base body armor that's at least 84. I got an 86 here, but it's at least 84. And it's the only modifier you want to hit, but it's a pretty rare modifier. A GG1 would be to also get Arcane Surge on it, but Arcane Surge is extremely rare. It's called Saga the Gems are supported by level 1 Arcane Surge. Also, the problem is it would you need to put your skill on the body armor, and I'll explain how it's bad. That's not a good idea once you have an IN staff, because then you want the skill to be in your staff. Also, with Sire of Shards, you need to socket your Freezing Pulse in the Sire of Shards to get the Nova effect. But yeah, besides the crit chance, you might also want to craft with, if you want to put money on it, and you probably want to fossil craft with Pristine, so that you can have the increase plus flat maximum life. In our case, we didn't do that. I just wanted the crit chance, and this one I kept because we got that pretty high max life roll. That's a tier 2 max life roll, on top of the tier 1 crit chance. The rest is irrelevant. Would have been nice to have res here, because in my current build we are struggling on getting res. It was pretty costly to get a certain ring just to fit our res. Also, like, I have crafted stats and res here. At best we'd want to have multi. There's a modifier, Veil modifier, which is crit chance and crit multi if you crit it recently. But yeah, that's the body armor. The problem, what's costly here is to get the base, because a high item level Shaper body armor can be costly. And then on the gloves, I don't have this yet. It's not exactly important, but on the gloves, what you will want is a corruption that has spell chances have +1 spell crit chance. The same modifiers here, but as a corruption. And the problem with that is that you want good gloves with res and life, but then those will cost you maybe 10, 20, 30 C depending on what you get. And then you want to corrupt it, which has a chance of just losing the item. So I didn't do it yet, but that's probably what we're going to do next. And then that's pretty much it. In our case, we'd probably be missing a corruption, not a corruption, but an enchant on the boots. The enchant on the boots, most are irrelevant, because it's usually if you have killed recently, and we don't kill anything, the totems do, so there's that. And then there's the enchant on the helmet, but that's pretty annoying to get these days. I've done a bunch of Uber labs, didn't get it yet. The one you'll probably want, the most important, will be Freezing Pulse projectile speed. I'll explain So I'll explain it now. So projectile speed, why it's important for Freezing Pulse is that a Freezing Pulse projectile has a length of life. So the more projectile speed you have, it's basically getting you more AoE. Because the faster they move, the more distance they will be able to travel before they're disappearing. But on top of it, that's true of any projectile. Skill, really, it's even more true in Freezing Pulse, because Freezing Pulse, how it works is as it travels, it loses damage. But down to 50% at the end of its travel distance. The thing is by increasing its speed, therefore increasing its range, then it will slow down slower. Not slower, but like if you got 50% of the distance without projectile speed, but then you add projectile speed, that 50% moves further down the distance, therefore the same point where it was will have more damage. That's a bit convoluted to explain, but without paint, and I'm not going to do that. So that's why projectile speed is extremely important. Luckily, quality in the Freezing Pulse is massive projectile speed. Now, I have a 21-23 here. I got lucky in my corruption when I reached 20-20. But yeah, at 20, it's 60% projectile speed. That's huge. Another option you can add if you want to go that route is faster proj support. That's another 70% projectile speed. Then you get 30 here. That's pretty enough. Like, you don't need to find it on the tree because you're not close to the ranger area or whatnot. And that's pretty much it for gear. Now the staff, when you're ready to not use the Sire of Shards, this will be the costiest upgrade of all. Again, you have two options. Well, first of all, you need a Shaper Staff that is 83. Item level 83 Shaper Staff. Now that's pretty cheap because no one uses staves. So you'll get it for cheap. Now Eclipse Staff will be more costly because there's people that uses Eclipse Staff because it's a lot of crit. So the difference between Maelstrom and Eclipse is the Eclipse Staff, instead of having the plus 20% chance to block attack damage while wielding a staff as an implicit, it has plus 100% global crit chance. In our case, I tested it, and it's not that much because we have a lot of global crit chance, so it's on the 3 and because of power charges. So it was not exactly relevant, and I prefer having the block chance for tanking purposes. So that's that. But you have two options. The important part is that the staff is Shaper and 83 level plus. Now you have 3 mods that you want to hit, but you'll probably just hit 2 because 2 of them are fossil related. So again, you'll be crafting with Frigid and Etheric, preferably the Frigid one first, and then Etheric on top of it if you want it. If you want to. Now the fossil part will be the cheap part. What you want to hit is the plus 2 to cold gems. This one you want it on it because it's pretty often. It's a 2000 chance to hit if you know how crafting works. Like all mods have a chance to hit attached to it, and then all chances of all mods available are added together, and then it rolls on that. So the higher the number, the more often the mod will show up. And now the cold gem modifier exists on all staves. By using a Frigid, you can increase the chance of that modifier to happen. And then the Shaper reason, and actually we didn't hit it on the staff, but it's the other modifier you want. It's the cold resistance. Socketed gems have 20% penetration. That's not exactly the wording, but that's the modifier. That's a Shaper modifier. We didn't get it. It's not that rare, but I stopped crafting because we also got a crit multi on this one, which helps us. And then, again, Sogage skills deal 20% more spell damage. I think that's a Frigid only fossil craft. It's either that or a Shaper modifier. Either way, you'll get it on this staff if you use this method that I explained it. So you want to hit... personally, my aim was to get at least 2 of those mods. Plus 2 to cold gems, plus to 20% more spell damage. The penetration, the 20% penetration I was explaining. There's also another one which is 10% elemental penetration. It's not as strong as the 20%, obviously, but it's a good one. And then there's the spell damage that I crafted here, but you can get more if you get the modifier. And or cold damage. We hit the +2 to cold gems. There's also +1 to all gems, but that one is extremely rare. So if you get it, it's good. But if you get it on its own, it's not good. It's not a good staff. And the GG would be the +2 here and the +1 on gem. But yeah, that's gonna be a lot of rerolls. And while it's cheap, it means trading for fossils and resonators. Not my thing. But go for it if you want. And then since we hit the crit, which I was not expecting, I wasn't counting on, I went for it. In our case here, you also want a prefix open. Prefix is more important because you can craft cold or spell. Like if you get one, you craft the other. If you don't get any, which in our case is the case, you go for spell damage because the modifier is higher and it does the same thing. If you only have a suffix open, for crafting, I can't show you because it's full here. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what suffix you would be able to craft on staves. I didn't check that before making the video. Let's check together. So suffix, two-handed melee. Oh, you have the cast speed. That's pretty good. The both crit are here too. Crit chance with spells. That's pretty huge. Damage by power charge, but it's not like if you're gonna craft here, might as well craft the crit chance. It's all super cheap to craft too. Qualities are relevant because we're not an attack build. You can have the arcane surge here if you want. Lose a bit of cast speed instead of the big cast speed modifier, but get the arcane surge on it. It's on kill though, so it's not exactly useful for a single target. That's pretty much it. So I go for the crit personally, or the cast speed. If it's prefixed, then it's spell or cold. Now the thing is with the cost is the problem is that the spell damage modifier is an X to craft. The big one, right? So if you're on a budget, you can either just go down one level, but in that case, I would go for the cold damage. Which is basically the same value. And yeah, for suffix I just went through, and then in our case, I spent another X to slam. I didn't have the lightning res on it. It was a pretty crappy slam, but if I had the cast speed on this, that would have been the GG staff. And then the next level is going to be 6 link. Now, in terms of links, I wouldn't do anything different here. So freezing pulse, obviously, you will need spell totem for obvious reasons. And then I would go hypothermia and control destruction. There's no question asked. This is the most damage you'll get. Early, if you decide to go freezing pulse super early, maybe not control destruction, because now crit chance can go down to 0, and so if you didn't build crit chance, you'll end up having no crit on this. So I would probably do added cold or whatever until you have built enough crit chance that the crit chance you lose on this is not that relevant. Hypothermia is super huge because on freezing pulse, with freezing pulse always chills, so the hypothermia will always be available. And then multiple totems, and that until you get until you get Ritual of Awakening, you can live with only 2 totems, or 3 if you go out Ancestral Bone right away, and then use something else, either Outer Cold, as I said, whatever. But once you have Ritual Awakening, you want multiple totems, because we'll go through the Ascendancy in a minute after I do the gems. But you get a more multiplier out of this. Now, as you can see, my links are not finished. The important things are this. So this is my cast 1 damage taken. Setup, I use Immortal Call. As you see, I also use Steel Skin. But Immortal Call is set on automatic. That's just my emergency button when I get a big hit, so that I am at least immune to physical damage. I also get the icon showing up, so I know I'm in danger, so then I flame dash out of dodge until I'm full again. And then I have increased duration for the Mold Call, and some of my Lightning Golem I always put on cast 1 damage taken. Another big, huge part of your damage, which you could change in your if you want for survivability, it's a Stormbrand. I use Stormbrand because it's higher mana cost, which means you can have a higher Arcane Surge on it. The other option would be Orb of Storm. Orb of Storm would be easier to control because you drop it at your feet. The Stormbrand, when there's a lot of mobs, it just disappears in Oblivion because it just keeps jumping around. So you have to recast it. But again, the base cost of Stormbrand is higher than Orb or Storm, meaning that you can have a higher Arcane Surge attached to it. For those who don't know how it works, Arcane Surge is a multiplier to spell damage and cast speed, which is huge. It's triggered, it's a support, so it's triggered when the attached skill, the supported skill, uses a certain amount of mana. Now you can go higher than this and just cast multiple times. It memorizes how much mana you've been using since last time Arcane Surge triggered, but the usual way you do it is to set it up so that whenever you cast it, it triggers. Because the higher you level up Arcane Surge, the more spell damage and cast speed you'll get, but the higher the threshold of mana is up. So if I level up Arcane Surge right now, I'm not going to get it every single cast because my Stormbrand is 27 and this Arcane Surge level is 26. The next level is 28, I think, so then I would have to cast twice. Curse on hit, and I use Projectile's weakness. If you're going for damage, this is no question asked. Projectile weakness is the way to go. It's a lot more damage. Other option would be Frostbite if you're not full crit yet. Frostbite would give you more freeze chance for defensive purposes. In my case, I'm like at 90 effective crit chance, so I don't care. Also, there's a little more in case you can't freeze a target because it had way too much HP. Then also projectiles knocks back enemies, so the enemy is going to be knocked back, which sometimes will make them cancel their skill because they are effectively moving. So that's the core stuff, and then the rest, again, I didn't link it yet. I'm using Steel Skin. This is my an instant cast for me. Can't always use it because Immortal Call and Steel Skin uses the same cooldown, but I like to have one that is a personal cast for when I do Legion. So the 20 second I use to kill to tag the frozen mobs of Legion, most likely my Immortal Call didn't get triggered because nothing's attacking me because everything's frozen at that, which means my cooldown is free for Steel Skin. As soon as the mobs spawn for Legion, then I spawn Steel Skin. I have 5 totems around me, so it gives me a buffer of HP for the time, the starting moments of all Legion mobs spawning, so I don't get murdered. And then after that, Immortal Call will pick up the slack. I could have increased duration on this, but again, it's links. I could put it here, but yeah. Now, Frostbomb is huge. I only use it for single target because it takes a while to trigger, and I kill so fast that for mobs it's pointless. On mobs, I'll always, as you've seen me clear at the start of the video, I dash in, I pop totems ahead of me, and then I put a Stormbrand on it. Very often, if I do white maps, I don't even need the Stormbrand. And then Zealotry is my go-to. That's my damage aura. It's by far the best aura you can find for damage because again, it's crit chance. It's spell crit chance, it's crit multi. It also has a minor defensive thing, but don't count on it. It's cast Consecrated Ground, and the problem is cast Consecrated Ground on the totems because they are the ones doing the damage, so you have to stay close to the totems, which are the ones getting hit, so that's pretty irrelevant, but it's mainly for the crit and the more multiplier, of course. And then faster casting Flame Dash, that's for movement purposes. Now, in the end, I would like to link this. Now I have my PoE here. Now, don't count this because this is basically the Dream version. That's how I always use Path of Building. But I don't remember what I'm using here. Oh yeah, Valve for Righteous Fire. If I could get a blue socket, but as you can see everything is red, that's my problem here. But eventually I'll have another blue, and I'd use Righteous Fire, not the Righteous Fire itself, because I don't have the regen to deal with that, but Righteous Fire is a Val skill that I could set up here, And when I pop it, I lose 30% of my HP, which will refill automatically because I have a lot of regen. Not enough for Righteous Fire, but enough to recover that. And for the duration, it gives you 30% more spell damage, which would be useful for single target, basically. But it's not the most relevant. And that's pretty much it. Well, I could have an Enlighten on Zealotry to get more mana, as you've seen on the tree, as we'll go to the tree now, really quickly. I'll use my Nova Matter. So, we're a Templar, we're going out here. You can get out here at the start to just get more damage as you start, but eventually you'll find out that it's more efficient to save the 2 points and use them elsewhere. So yeah, here, now we go down here, life here, and this is just for the stats and regen. A bunch of elemental spell damage here. Now we're not going down this way, we're going up here, that's regen. You'll need a lot of mana regen, because as you can see, our totems cost 107, that's only on the 5 link. So you'll need a lot of mana regen, that's the thing. Now the thing is, you're an Hierophant, so all your minor nodes here are mana regen. Yeah, and on top of that, we're getting this, but we'll go to that in a second. Minor of Matter, as I just explained. Now we'll go up to the jewel, but you want 2 intelligence focused jewels, so these 3, these 4. Well, you have 5 that would be available, but this one is the one. It might be different for your build here, because again, the seed number gave me those numbers, but the problem is you want this node, so if the Militant Fate jewel you get changes this node, then that jewel is not good for you. So yeah, we're going here. Basically, we're just looking for life, power charges, and crit. So we're going here because there's life here, power charge here, the spell damage with the power charge, a jewel, massive crit chance here. This is res because again, as I said, I have problems with getting my res up to par, but it's also cast speed with cold skills and cold damage. It's pretty good. Spell damage, crit cast chance, more life. Now massive mana here, and it gives us some shield. Not a lot, but some shield. I'll go here, get the jewel, we travel up here just to get the life. If you don't want this life node, you can go down here, it's cheaper. The other option you could have is take this, put it here. It's a bit less life, but more ES. So it depends on how you're going to build. If you're not going to go armor bases, and you decide to go ES bases, this might be better for you. You can also put a, don't remember the name, but the jewel that turns life into ES. That's an option. Again, this build is very versatile in terms of how you can build it. And then we go down here, well, just take the power charge, a jewel, that's our Watcher's Eye. I'll go through it in a second. It's not the best we could get, but the one we want because it's cold damage, and Glacial Cascade always makes cold jewels cost a fortune. And then massive crit here, more crit here, and then life. Now, Watcher's Eye, what I wanted specifically is the critical strikes penetrates 10% of elemental resistances while affected by Zealotry, so that's another 10% elemental resistance reduction, because again, we have around 90% crit chance here. At the grace part, what is irrelevant, and the base stats are always the same. What you could want here is crit chance, increased crit chance if you have... I don't even think the Watcher's Eye is set up here for... We'll look for it. I don't think Zealotry is in PoE, yeah, it's not. But there's one for crit chance. I think it's when you are on a consecrated ground. When you're on consecrated ground, get crit chance. Not that PoE. Very professional video. I was completely prepared here. Who cares? So, show you one for this, but okay. Yeah, increase a massive 120% crit chance against enemies and critical normal affected by Zealotry. In that case, you might want to use a Sulfur Flask or a gift from above. I'll go through the options in a second, but then you'll want your Consecrated Round to be more efficient. So yeah, there's that. For the Washer's Eye, but I would really focus on the elemental resistance first, because this is not it's not limited to consecrated ground. And then on the other side of the tree, we go up here to get this jewel. In our case, because I had the Militant Fate jewel before making the build. I actually made the build because I wanted to use the jewel. So I went here. Well, I tested it in my other characters, and then found out that this jewel slot didn't screw this one up and gave me those. I'm not using them, but yeah. So I used it here, but then you might have to test around. The thing is, you have options, because your first snows can go in all of those 4 sockets, because you need 40 intelligence. So you can put it here on all of those 4 sockets, so you have space to try out this jewel and see where it fits best. Now here could screw this, but this one might be the easiest if it doesn't screw up your power charge. This one has way too many stings. This one touches nothing, I think, actually, but it takes away dexterity, which is hard to get on the build. But you'll have to see if you want to use the jewel, but you'll probably want to use it, because that's the main thing. We're getting this, which is usually a Valar Fire, but it's inner conviction for us because of the jewel. I'll explain in a second. Life here, Ancestral Bond, obviously. The last power charge on the tree, another jewel here, life, and then massive crit. This is for attack, but this is for cast. So this is massive. We get block chance here, but we have cast speed, block chance, cast speed, block chance, cast speed, block chance. The power charge is irrelevant because we get our power charges by just generating totems. But then here you have a massive 90% crit chance and 30% multiplier. So yeah, this is a have to get, and then same thing here. Global strike chance, devotion comes from the jewel. Global strike chance and multi, strike chance and a multi, crit chance and multi. And then you have more crit chance here, and then the power charges. So if I generate my power charges, it's not going to be all my crit chance here, because there's stuff on if you have killed recently. But with 6 charges, we have 62%. Plus Diamond Flask. Go to the Flask now. So Flasks are pretty generic. I'm using an Adrenaline, Quicksilver, and a Silver Flask of Adrenaline, and that's just for movement speed. As you can see, when they are both active, we move pretty fast for clear speed. If you don't exactly care about that, I would still keep the Adrenaline modifier, but I would get rid of the Quicksilver and probably use a Granite or a Jade, or whatever you want for defenses, or a Sulfur. Sulfur is 40% increased damage if you want, plus a Consecrated Ground spawned on where you are. Especially important if you're going to use the Zealotry modifier for crit chance. But the main thing is the suffixes. So you obviously want a Heat Flask, unless no, what I was talking about is this is going to be impossible to have your dexterity higher than your intelligence. So you want a Heat Flask, and you want a Staunching Flask. Now personally I put Staunching on my Life Flask, because generally speaking, if I'm bleeding, I'm losing life as well, so I put it here. Downside of this is that Life and Mana Flasks, if you don't know, end their duration as soon as they hit the max value. So if you want the Staunching more permanently, to just actually be immune, then you want the Staunching on something else. But in my case, I don't want the immunity really, I just want to cleanse it when it's there. And then you want a Heat Flask and a Warding Flask. These are pretty mandatory. Warding Flask is really just when you reach yellow maps and above, because it cancels out the permanent curses you have on maps. And then Heat is, you're gonna die if you don't have Heat because of boxes mainly. Then I use Iron Skin here because I have a lot of armor, so that's just buffing my armor. I would probably use a Granite instead of Basalt. I've just been lazy about it. And usually, personally, I go Experimenter. You could use Surgeon too, because it's a crit build, so Surgeon will give you charges on crit. I've just been lazy on rebuilding this. I like Experimenter or Chemist, because this is either Duration or Chemist is going to be less charges. And this one has just been lazy too. The All Diamond Flask work, by the way, is it rerolls if you didn't crit. So, as I said, we have, what, 62%? Yeah, 62%. So if I don't roll a crit, if I roll the 38% that is not crit, then it's going to have a 62% chance to crit. Out of the 38%, so you can add 62% of 38 to the 62% base. It's really good when you have an... It's bad. A Diamond Flask is bad if you have very low crit chance, or if you have super high crit chance. In our case, we could actually get away with the Diamond Flask. Without Diamond Flask, I have about 85 in game once I have kills. So, yeah, I could get away with it. I just, again, I've been lazy. The build works, so I don't need to rework things. Last thing is Ascendancy, and then the Jewel. So the first thing you'll want to do is Pursuit of Fate. It's to get basically your totems not last 2 seconds, and then you'll get an extra totem, and the damage per enemy killed while you clear fast while leveling, it stacks up really, really fast. Also the cast speed makes it feel good. On top of that, you'll want a Ritual Awakening. Well, I would go Conviction of Power second, and that's basically by that time you'll probably have power charges, so you want a way to generate them. So how Conviction of Power works is every time you summon a totem, you have 50% chance to generate a charge. And since you're summoning 2, because we have multiple totems, we also have eventually Ritual Awakening, which does the same, and it's not +1, it's really 2, so we're not going to summon 3. But what I want to say is since you're summoning 3, it has a chance of giving you 2 charges, like it just did. Because it's per totem, it's not per cast. Also, every time we generate a power charge, we have 25% chance of generating an endurance charge. So 50% chance per totem, and then every time it triggers one, it's 25% chance. So if you are in a difficult map, or before a boss that you feel is going to be difficult, you can do this. Just spam your totems, and eventually you'll get all your charges. And then you can go in. Also, it's not only survivability because of the charges, but once you have Ritual Awakening, each totem gives you 1% life per second and 0.5% per mana per totem. So at 5 totems, it's a 5% life regeneration and 2.5% mana regeneration. Because we have Mana over Matter, mana is also survivability. So you want as much as you can. That's where most of our... just to make a difference. So we have 375 to 03. When the totem drops, we'll see. That's just the endurance charges. Yeah, 101 and 87. So it's a lot more regen when you have the totems out. That's pretty huge. But the main thing is that each totem also gives you 3% more damage per totem. I tested things out, because the thing is, multiple totems, it reduces the damage of all totems. So I wanted to see if I'm better off using 5 totems with multiple totems in, because then it uses the more damage totem here, so it gives me an extra +6 more damage. Or I remove multiple totems, put something else in it that is actual damage, so I only have 3 totems. But those 3 totems would hit much harder, because instead of having a socket that reduces damage, it's going to be a socket that adds damage. But it's better this way. Mainly because it's roughly the same damage, but then you have more sustain because of this. Also, because you have the 50% totem placement, and there's totem placement in these small nodes too, it's so freaking fast to cast a 5 anyways, so it's not the big deal here. So, first Pursuit of Fate, then Conviction of Power, then Ritual Awakening, then the 4th one is kind of irrelevant. I went for this for survivability, but you could also just have the Arcane Surge here. Buffing your Arcane Surge, since you always have it with Stormbrand. So then you could, if you want damage, you can go Limited Devotion. It will make your give you 40% increased spell, 50% with this, 50% increased spell damage. You're not going to get the spell damage leeches life because it's going to leech to the totems, and the arrow effect is relevant because of our projectiles. So yeah, but I went for this because this is massive mana and also increases our amount of matter. So instead of 30%, it's 40%. Plus more mana, which means more regen. Yeah, and then the Jewel. I explained the basics of the Jewel, but the main purpose of the Jewel, if you take the get a Military Fate that is supported by Dominus, Then it gives you Inner Conviction. Inner Conviction means that you're never going to get Frenzy Charges, and if you had Frenzy Charge generation, it would generate Power Charges instead. But the main thing is that all Power Charges gives you 3% more spell damage. So in our case, we have 6 Power Charges, that's 18% more damage. It's huge. Another thing you can do is there's 2 ways to get +1 Power Charge. That's the one thing we wanted, but it's like 100%, 100 chance. It's super tiny chances. In comparison, like +2 Cold Gem is 2000. So, but there's a modifier. It's a shaper suffix on staves that gives +1 Power Charge, and then you can get it as a corruption on globes too. But the base spell crit is better. That would be 7 with this. Another option you can do if you don't want to do staves, I'll just do this really quickly. I tested it; it's a lot more damage, a lot more squishy though. Instead of taking this wheel, you can travel here and take the dual wheel here, and then the ones here. So it would be more efficient to get Devotion. I didn't do it because my jewel is ruining this node, but if you have a jewel here that doesn't ruin this node, what you can do is do the dual Void Batteries. And that would be about 40% more damage than this build. I didn't need the damage, so I didn't go for it. Also, Void Batteries are not cheap. But because Void Batteries each gives you more +1 Power Charge, on top of what Void Batteries do to spell damage, it's like 420% more spell damage just from Power Charges on the ones. But on top of that, it's 2 more Power Charges, so it's more crit, but it's also another 6% spell damage per Power Charge. Now, I prefer my build because it's tankier because of the block, and it's less reliant on Power Charges. So yeah, but it's an option you can do. It would be faster because this wheel gives you cooldown recovery speed of movement skid, which Flame Dash is, and then there's movement speed on the other side. It's also on the Devotion wheel, so it depends on what your jewel gives you. That's pretty much it. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments. Also, if you see something that you could do better about the build, feel free to tell me. We still have scaling to do. Of course, we're not 6 linked, and we have sockets that we can make better. And for the next levels, we're at 93 right now. The next levels would be the end life nodes here, the 3 here. I had them before I got here. I just respect here because it was more life. But yeah, at 93 we'd have 1 here, another here, so that's 11 plus 5, that's 16 more life. With a hit like 5800-ish. With a bit more life on this, we could reach 6k and 1k mana. But we're already pretty tanky, so... And that would be 96, and then the last 4... I don't remember what wheel it was. Oh yeah, there's an extra endurance charge you can get here. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Guys, thanks for watching. If you have any comments, feel free to comment below. Any questions, same thing. Don't forget to follow, to subscribe to the channel. Follow us on Twitch. I stream PoE almost every day, so if you want to see the builds in progress, feel free to drop on the Twitch channel. It will all be in the description. Feel free to subscribe here too. Ring the alert bell to know when I post a new build, new content. What I'm gonna plan to do on the future is make a few videos per build. First, a tier craft build with PoE in the mind from the ground up, and then an update when I reach the end of leveling, and then 1 or 2 as I level up to 90 to see if the build works or not. I don't know what my next build is going to be. I'm thinking a Goldemancer, but I'm not going to reinvent the wheel on that one, so we'll see. I'll put it on the channel either if you want to see it. Guys, thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.